We'll start with a story, because everyone likes a story. I think, my opinion at least. I heard this story from Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, one of his recordings, talking about a prolific speaker. He's definitely one of those. And sometimes you hear a story and it really hits the spot. And I think it relates a little bit to the topic that I wanted to discuss today. So the story takes us back probably in the 50s and maybe even earlier in Eretz Yisrael in Israel. And there was a rabbi in the city of Haifa who opened a synagogue, had an ongoing synagogue. And right near the synagogue on the same street, same block, possibly even next door, there's a clothing store being run by a Jewish person. The only issue was that it was open on Shabbos. It was a successful store run by a Jewish man. And of course, the rabbi was running into some issues because it was really not in the spirit of Shabbos. They would come and go from shul and there would be people outside doing business, and it just really didn't lend to the spirit of Shabbos, to the atmosphere. So one time the rabbi went over to the owner and he said to him, "Can I ask you a favor? Just as a neighborly friend, and could you mind maybe closing just while we're in shul, Shabbos morning?" So the man said to him, "Well, no way. I'm not religious. I'm secular. I got my store. You want to have your synagogue? I'm not bothering you. Have your synagogue. But my store is open because I do business on all days of the week." And you wouldn't hear about anything. The rabbi was very frustrated. And no matter what he tried, the person did not want to hear about anything. So one day he was, I think it was in Tel Aviv. At that time, there lived there a Hasidic Rebbe, is known as the Seret Vizhnus Rebbe, by Baruch Hager. And he said to him, I have this shul and I have near it this clothing store and it's open on Shabbos and I Yom Tov and he refuses to close. What do I do? So the rabbi said to him, Rabbi Hager asked the rabbi from Haifa, "Let me ask you a question. Do you love that store owner, this Jewish person?" It was an odd question. Do I love him? No, actually I don't. As a matter of fact, I think it's the opposite. I mean, I probably shouldn't love him. After all, he is publicly desecrating the Shabbos. So how could I love him? I actually have ill feelings towards him. Not only does he not, keep Shabbos, even when someone asks him to honor it a little bit, just for others, he doesn't want to hear about it. So Rabbi Hager says to him, "So you say to me that the reason you don't like him is because he has a store open on Shabbos." So Rabbi Hager asked him, "Maybe it's the other way around." The other way around? Yes. In other words, maybe the reason he doesn't close his store on Shabbos is because you don't love him. It's because you show hatred towards him. Not he's open on Shabbos, therefore you don't like him. Maybe it's the exact opposite. Maybe you are actually contributing. Maybe you're part of the cause that he's open on Shabbos. The rabbi of Haifa was definitely taken aback. So he said to Rabbi Hager, "So what should I do?" So what you should do? I mean, it's simple. When it comes this coming Shabbos, go into the store, wish him a good Shabbos, and tell him you love him. I should tell him I love him, but I don't. It's not true. He says, "Well, work on yourself. You should." So the rabbi from Haifa says to Rabbi Hager, "Why should I? Let me get this straight in my mind. Why should I love him?" So you should love him because he has a godly soul. So do you, and you come from one place. He's your brother. So I should go in next Shabbos, which means in a couple of days from now, tell him I love him. She says, but I don't love him yet. It's okay, you have a whole week to work upon yourself. He went home. No, sorry. And Rabbi Hager says to him, I want you to do this for 6 months. Not one Shabbos, not 2. Do it straight for 6 months. So the Rabbi from Haifa goes home, and to his merit, he followed instructions. Came the coming Shabbos, and he walks into the guy's store. No sooner did he set foot in the store, and the storekeeper shouts at him, Lech mipo, get out of here. You came to tell me off. You came to tell me what to do. Leave. Get out of my store. So the rabbi said, no. I didn't come to tell you what to do. I didn't come to ask you for anything. I simply want to wish you good Shabbos and tell you that I love you. Now is this the turn for the storekeeper to be surprised. He said, you love me? What? Did something happen? Is everything all right? He said, I'm telling you I love you. He says, why do you love me? Says the storekeeper to the rabbi. He said, I love you because you are my brother. You're a fellow Jew. And I want to give you a hug. And he gives him a hug. Leaves the store. The storekeeper is totally bewildered. What's this rabbi on? But next Shabbos he comes in, he does the same thing. Shabbos after Shabbos after Shabbos. And after 6 months, the store wasn't open on Shabbos anymore. If the Sarah's vision to Rebbe wouldn't have advised him as he did, if he didn't have that clear vision as to the really are, most probably that Rabbi from Haifa would have gone about his life and certainly had the thought in his mind that he's doing the right thing, keeping Shabbos, and the guy down the street who has a store open, he's a good for nothing, and so forth and so on. But the truth is that within every single one of us is a godly, holy soul, the neshama, and it just needs sometimes a boost. Sometimes just needs the schmutz, the dirt, the dust that has covered it, sometimes just has to be cleaned off. This week's Parsha, Mishpatim, discusses all the laws that pertain to our life, daily life kind of, really mundane kind of laws. How to treat a slave, how long you get to keep him, what sets him free, a Jewish slave, a non-Jewish slave, damages that you cause to someone, what you must pay, on and on and on. Really mundane laws, down to earth, things you would find in a court of law. Of course, this is all prefaced by last portion, third portion of Yisrael, where we all stood around Mount Sinai, and God gave us the 10 Commandments, followed by Moshe Rabbeinu spending 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain, where God taught him all the rest of the deal, the 613 commandments with the details. So in last week's Torah portion, Rashi mentions an interesting question with an answer to a verse in the Torah. It says that God went ahead and came down upon Mount Sinai and spoke to the Jewish people. Rashi quotes another verse that says that God spoke from the heavens. To make up your mind, did God speak from the heavens, or did he come upon Mount Sinai and speak from Mount Sinai? So Rashi answers this question and says that God took the heavens and spread them out as you would a sheet upon a bed or a tablecloth upon a table, spread out the heavens upon Mount Sinai, and that's how he told us the 10 Commandments. So yes, God was speaking from the heavens, which were on Mount Sinai. Okay, it's definitely a good answer. The only thing is it raises us a question. We look around us. We've all been around for a while. Most of you, all of you, have been around a lot longer than me, or Rabbi Smith, and you should be around a lot longer. We know when we look around us, things run in what we call a pretty natural way. There's the laws of nature. And there's a reason for that, because God created the world that should run on a steady course. The laws of nature are God's norm for the world. Of course, we read in the Torah, or the books of the prophets, miracles that happen, but that was the out of the norm. That's not the ongoing situation. So why does God go ahead and do a miracle? There's a specific reason for it. Why does He split the sea so the Jewish people can walk through? The entire world will know about it. At the same time, get rid of our enemies. Why does God do the 10 plagues? So the Egyptians should realize that their idols are not gods at all. And God himself is the one in charge of the world, and so on and so forth. The miracles that we see, read about, and so on, have specific reasons for them. But that leaves us with wondering, why does God go ahead and bother to take the heavens and put them on Mount Sinai, and then speak from the heavens that are on Mount Sinai? What was the usefulness of that trick? Why does God do that miracle? So the Rebbe explains with a little bit of a preface. When we read the Torah, we become aware of the fact that although the Torah was given to us at Mount Sinai, there were commandments that were known by people beforehand too. Never mind the fact that Avram Avinu, Abraham, had a bris. Okay, he was directly told by God. But we know that our avos, our matriarchs, our patriarchs, kept Torah. They were aware of all the commandments, not just the 613 commandments, even those things that will be enacted by our sages later on. They knew about those too. In that case, was there any difference between Abraham putting on a pair of tefillin or Moshe after the giving of the Torah? Was there a difference between Isaac or Jacob putting a mezuzah on their doorposts and nowadays when we put a mezuzah on our doorposts? And at first glance, most probably would say, I myself doing a mitzvah nowadays obviously doesn't come close to our matriarchs, our patriarchs doing mitzvahs in those days. I mean, those were holy, holy people. Those are the foundations of our nation. But the Rebbe explains, actually, it's true. As people, they were totally above us. But what they caused with their action, what they were able to accomplish by doing the mitzvah, that's something that they could not do, but we can do. What is that? You see, God created the world originally where there was a separation. There's the holy worlds, the heavens, and so on above. There's the physical, mundane world down here below. As it says in our Hallel, in our special prayers that are brought from Psalms that we say on Rosh Chodesh and on special holidays. Hashamayim, Shamayim Lashem, the heavens are for God, the haaretz, and the earth, Nasan of the Adam, he gave to people. It was literally so up to the giving of the Torah. Godliness stayed above. That's what holiness was. Of course, it doesn't mean God wasn't here below. The world cannot exist without God. But godliness was hidden. It wasn't going to affect the world. Along came the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And God said, we are going to go ahead and break through this barrier. We're going to change the rules. Until now, when Avram Avinu, when Abraham, or any of the other people then, fulfilled one of the commandments, or maybe I can't call it a commandment, they were not commanded yet, Levi fulfilled one of the future commandments. Very nice, but it did not have a lasting effect. In other words, if they put on a pair of tefillin, the tefillin did not acquire any holiness to them. They were just a piece of leather. Today, when you put up a mezuzah, you have a plastic or metal or lucite cover, whatever it may be, and it breaks, it cracks. You can't just throw it out. It, even just the cover, has acquired holiness since it was used for a mitzvah. It was used to fulfill God's commandments. Therefore, we have to put it with shemus, with things that need to be buried, and so on. So this breakthrough allowed that we, with our actions, our interaction with physical things, actually permanently change those items. Those items acquire holiness. We're able to take holiness and bring it into this world. How did this happen? That's what Rashi is telling us. If you remember what I just said before, the heavens were brought down on top of Mount Sinai. And God spoke from the heavens while he was on Mount Sinai. God is the one that opened the door. He took the heavens that are usually above, and he said, I'm going to take the first step, and I'm going to put them on a physical mountain in this world. And from here on, you'll be able to do the same thing, to bring heaven down to earth, literally so. This helps us understand another concept over here. We see in this week's Torah portion, Mishpatim, there's a lot of laws that are really what you call common sense laws. It was throughout the Torah, three categories of laws. You have laws that are common sense, meaning that it's a good chance, most likely, if the Torah did not command us such a law, we would come to the same conclusion ourselves. If someone goes ahead and damages someone else's property, common sense would say that we should pay for it. Common sense says, if God forbid somebody kills someone, there needs to be a punishment. On the other hand, there are laws, which are not common sense per se. Keep Shabbos. I wouldn't have come to such a conclusion of my own. I wouldn't think that I need to eat kosher. God tells me what's kosher, what's not kosher. Now I know. So hold on a set of laws. But amongst those laws that are not common sense laws, there are those that have very well understood reasons. You know, like when people challenge you and they say, how do you know God created the world? So I've heard many people say, well, you know, I find it interesting that the week is made up of 7 days. It's a very odd mathematical number. The number 7 doesn't fit into the month. There's always days remaining after 4 weeks. It doesn't fit into 10. It just doesn't compute very well. Why is there a 7-day week? We can't seem to find another reason other than the fact that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. But keeping Shabbos has a reason, as we just said. That's the day God rested from creation. Okay. Now that you tell me the reason, I understand it. It has a logical, understood reason. And so forth, so many mitzvos. We wear tzitzis, God tells us, to remind us of our commandments. Okay, it's a uniform. We have that in our daily life. Many professions have uniforms. You can tell a plumber on the street usually. You certainly could tell a policeman or someone in the army. You can usually tell a doctor, and so forth and so on. We too wear a uniform. We have a yarmulke and our tzitzis. We light Shabbos candles. We understand the reasoning. It brings light to the home. So we so far have two categories of mitzvos. Common sense, which we probably would think of all on our own. We have the mitzvos, which we call edus. They are testimonial mitzvos. We have a reason for them. They remind us of something. And then we have a third category of mitzvos. Those are the ones that we don't really have an understanding of. Many of them leave us totally baffled. For example, kosher. God tells us in the Torah, keep kosher because you're a holy nation. Why am I more holy if I eat an animal slaughtered this way or not slaughtered? Why am I more holy if I eat meat separate from milk or if I mix them together? We're not given a logical reason in the Torah. And other mitzvahs like that. We call these chukim, statutes. You got to do it because I said so. That's what God says. When it comes to the common sense laws, we actually left wondering, why does God bother to tell us a law that's common sense? The Torah, after all, does not waste any space or any time. All the words, even the letters in the Torah, are very specific. You open a volume of Talmud, and we'll start taking apart a verse and wanting to know why this language was used, why that letter was there or was not there, and so forth and so on. And different opinions will give you reasons for each thing. One letter in the Torah can bring us many, many laws. Why the need for common sense commandments? But now that we've explained why God had to do the miracle, bring the heavens down to Mount Sinai to break through, to bring these spiritual worlds and enable them to become enmeshed with the physical world, now we understand. When God gives us a commandment, it is actually now becoming a holy duty to do that. When we keep that commandment, we are bringing a spiritual life force into the physical things that we have used in order to do that. The computer screens that we're all using now are being infused with holiness because we're using them to do the mitzvah of learning Torah and anything else we're using along the line there, and so forth and so on. We go through our daily life and every single thing we use it in a positive way. It changes that item forever. It infuses it with holiness. We use it a second time, obviously it does it more and more and more. And it doesn't make a difference if we do this mitzvah one time or 1,000 times. In other words, I mean to say, it doesn't make a difference. Even if a person does a mitzvah one time and doesn't plan on ever doing it again, that one time of mitzvah will still leave its spiritual mark on that item. The godly soul is incredible. And it has powers that are just waiting to be uncovered. There's a story I read this week. You always take a risk telling a story, maybe everyone heard it. Because as Rabbi Smith knows from his kids, I was lucky to teach some of his boys. In the middle of a story, you never interrupt. If you ask any questions, and the answer to that is as follows. There's two kinds of questions. One that's going to be answered in the story, and the other ones are not important now. So I just read this story. I saw the story yesterday. A sibling of mine sent it to me. She sent a link to some Instagram, which I don't have Instagram, so I clicked on it. It wouldn't let me sign up. I'm not on Instagram. But she commented on the story, wow. I said, I wish I knew what that wow was. I can't read your story. So she copied it and sent me this story. Fine. And I read the story. I said, you're right. That's a wow story. It's a really wow story. I don't remember the person in the story right now, whose name it was. where I could possibly find it while I'm telling it. But the main character in our story, one of the main characters, is a boy, a 16-year-old boy. The 16-year-old boy was a drummer. He was once playing at a wedding, and during a break, he went out to smoke a cigarette. Someone comes over to him while he's standing outside smoking a cigarette, and he says to him, smoking is bad for your health. Can anybody guess how a 16-year-old reacts to that? He laughed. So thank you very much. He laughed at him. So the man didn't give up with that. And he says to him, the man's name was Harry. I'm not sure what his Jewish name was. So Harry says to him, he's smoking. Tell me something. Do you at least learn? You smoke. Do you also learn? He says, learn. Laughs. Of course not. So, okay, do you smoke? Do you at least daven? Do you also daven? He says, nah. Are you kidding me? He says, do you put on tefillin? He says, not anymore. Boy goes back inside. He's got to go back to playing. And this man, Harry, follows him in. Goes up right up on stage, and he whispers in his ear, and he says to him, if you go ahead and take upon yourself to put on tefillin for the next 30 days straight, I will buy for you the best drum set that you can find. Is that a deal? 16-year-old says, okay, we got a deal. So Harry says to him, do you have a cell phone number? I want you to, I want to communicate about this. He said, I don't have a cell phone. It's like, okay, what's your address? So the boy gives Harry his address. Good. The next day, 9 o'clock in the morning, a driver comes to this 16-year-old's house. There's a cell phone for him and instructions that every morning he should call when he's put on tefillin, call to say that he's put on tefillin. Takes the phone. Next morning he gets up, and in the course of the morning, goes ahead and he calls up, says, I put on tefillin this morning. Next morning, I put on tefillin this morning. It goes on day after day after day. But he had never put on tefillin. He just said he did. 30 days, after 30 days of putting on tefillin, saying he put on tefillin, 9 o'clock in the morning, Harry shows up. He calls the 16-year-old on the phone. He says, come on downstairs. We're going to go buy a drum set. Goes downstairs, takes him to a music store, picks out the top notch, the best drum sets, with all the bells and whistles. Has it delivered back to his house. The boy sets it up in his room, and he thinks to himself, no, there's something wrong with this. I didn't earn it. I got a drum set for which I didn't even put on tefillin one time. He says, I'm not touching this drum set until I fulfill my promise and put on tefillin for 30 days. So that's what he did. Stop putting on tefillin. And he never stopped putting on tefillin. Years later, he met Harry at a wedding. This is years gone by already. And he said to him, Harry, I don't know if you know, but you know that those first 30 days, I never put on tefillin those first 30 days. So Harry said, I know. So he says to Harry, but I never stopped putting on tefillin since you gave me the drum set. And Harry says, I know that too. So I saw the story, and we don't understand the ways of Hashem, of course. But this boy who sent out the story is, I'm sure, I don't know how many years ago this story was. He's a young man now, probably. He came to daven at the gravesite of this Harry Rosenberg, who he says was one of the first people they discovered from the collapsed towers in Miami. He came to thank him once again for turning his life around. So why did Harry do this? I don't know, obviously. I probably never met Harry. But you think about it. Here was a fellow Jew, like the first story you mentioned about the rabbi in Haifa. And he said to himself, here is another Jew, another part of me, this 16-year-old. And he has a soul like me. It just needs to be polished a little bit. The dirt has to be cleared off. We got to scrub it a little bit. But he's going to come around. He had total faith that this boy was going to do something because he was going to show that he had faith in him. And the story, of course, proves it out. That's what we got at Mount Sinai. We got neshamas, we got a soul, which infused us with abilities beyond our imagination. We sometimes think that we've reached our limits. We only do so much. But the truth is we can always push ourselves a little more, in whichever way it is feasible for us. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe turned 70, he was a large Farbrengen. And the Rebbe himself said that many people had said to him, there's time to take a vacation. 70 years old. So, it's getting on in years. Not to retire. Just take a break for a week. So I don't know if the Rebbe said this at that particular moment or at another time. I know one time when it was suggested to the Rebbe to take a vacation, the Rebbe said, I'll never be able to make up that lost time. What I can do today can be made up for tomorrow. Tomorrow has its own work needs to be done. And anyone reading the history of the Rebbe knows that from the age of 70 and on, it was incredible what the Rebbe did. And a whole other dynamic altogether. The Rebbe always said, probably sometimes quoting from King Solomon, Adam la'amal yavali, the man is born, human beings are born and created to toil, to work. Whatever it is that we're doing, we might move, we might change from working in a shop to doing something else, but we should never stop producing. We should never stop accomplishing. Every day you should be able to turn back to that day and say, today I accomplished such and such. Maybe I shared stories with a young boy who's going to be inspired because I have a lot of life experience to share with him and so on. Things that we are able to do. As long as we have life in us, we are able to affect other people. And since we're able to, we're expected to also. And you never know what effect your words, what effect your actions might have in someone else. So there's another story, which I also heard from Rabbi Jacobson, who I mentioned earlier. Rabbi Yossi Jacobson. He says a story as follows. There was a young boy who did not have mazel, did not have good luck in yeshivas. He is, as we say in the Yiddish vernacular, he was a lebediger chevraman. He was a very lively boy. And in school, that doesn't always work out very well. It just didn't work out for him. He was thrown out of one school after another, after another, after another. And unfortunately, his father would punish him when things wouldn't work out. I'm talking to a crowd here that can understand, once upon a time when you came home to your parents and you told them, my teacher did such and such, so we got punished again. Because if a teacher did such and such to us, it probably was we misbehaving. Well, this boy, unfortunately, had a father who only saw it one way, and didn't understand how he could help his child. So when he got thrown out of one yeshiva, he got a double when he came home. Came to a point he was already 14 years old and he had been thrown out of 8 different schools. His father was at wit's end. What to do with him? What can I do with you? I have no more schools to send you to. Got him a plane ticket, put him on a plane, and sent him off to Israel. Figure something out. Imagine a 14-year-old arriving in Eretz Israel. Just like that. He walks into a shul, I think it was the Slonemer shul in Yerushalayim, if I believe, or I might be mistaken. He walks into a shul, and he's there. Everyone finishes davening, and he's still there. He has nowhere to go. So an older Jew there, I think his name was Rabbi Ashrae, I don't recall his last name. And he says to the boy, what are you doing here? Would you go to school or something? So he says, go to school. I've been to 8 different schools already. Each one of them has thrown me out. And now my father put me on a plane, sent me over here to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So the rabbi says to the rabbi, or Rabbi Osher says to him, listen, whatever happens, let me share a thought with you. There's a line in our daily davening, which we say more than once a day. It's in the Ashrae Prayer. The words say, Lo hidia livnei ha'adam gevuraysav, v'chavoid hadar malchusay. Simply translated, that we should let everyone know, the Adam, to the human beings, gevuraysav, the greatness of God. So he said, so Rabbi Osher said to the boy, we'll call the boy Moshe, just to enable our story here. He says to Moshe, whatever happens, always keep the following in mind. There's a Hasidic explanation for this verse, and it's translated and explained differently. He says as follows. God is so great and amazing, as we enumerate in Rashi. And the reason for this is that you should let every single human being know his greatness. And the his is not capitalized. His is referring to every single human being. Each one of us has great talents, great abilities, no matter where we find ourselves in life. And he's saying to the boy, you've been out of 8 schools already. You too have greatness, not just some good points. You have greatness in you too. Keep that in mind. Don't give up. Very nice. Eventually he got into a yeshiva. About 6 months later, he was thrown out. He got into another school, and the same thing happened there. So at this point, he's been out of 10 schools already. He's already a 15-year-old. He has no father to turn to. He's at wit's end. And unfortunately, he decided that there's nothing he can do anymore. And a life as miserable as this is not worth continuing. Found a tall building, went to the top 11th floor or so. He was walking along the edge, deciding to jump. He had a flashback to a year ago when he was in that little shul. And Rabbi Asher explained that verse to him. And he said to himself, you know what? Maybe you should first find out what my great points are, and then I'll make an informed decision if my life should come to an end or not. walked off the roof, went downstairs, and as we say in Yiddish English, I should say, he made a mention of himself. Opened a successful business, got married, had kids, Baruch Hashem, and he told this story himself to Rabbi Jacobson, who retold the story, which is where I heard it. Some of us are like polished diamonds. So clear what our greatness is. We sparkle, we shine. Everyone says, "Oh, how amazing, how great." Some of us are diamonds in the rough, but we're diamonds nonetheless. Some of us have to be polished a little bit. Some of us need to be polished and to still cut down to size and to this and to that. But each one of us has a neshama inside. And every neshama comes from the same source. Every godly soul has the same amazing, amazing power about it. Like in this story, it's doubtful that this Rav Usher, who had shared these lines with this young boy, the 14-year-old at that time, he probably didn't know that those very words were going to actually save the boy's life. Our job is to share and try to influence people positively, no matter where we go. Just this week, I reheard a story. I'll tell you part of it. There was a convention because this weekend, Rabbi Smith, is your wife in New York for this past Shabbat? Was she in New York, I should say? Many women traveled off to New York. Were you left home babysitting?
I wasn't. I'm very lucky.
Okay, there you go.
Next year.
So those that can make it in, many wives of Chabad rabbis make it into New York. Like Rabbi Smith said, they pick the coldest week of the year, which this time usually is in the Shvat, and it's around the Yortzeit of the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin. They have a convention. Well, years ago, there was a women's convention in Chicago. Deep in the middle of the winter. And after the weekend was over, they headed back to the airport to get back, and New York was hit with a tremendous snowstorm. The roads were not clear. Flights were not coming in. So when they got to the airport, they were told there's no flights today. Not going to get a flight to New York. Hopefully tomorrow, maybe the next day. So while they were still at the airport, I think all of us over here can remember those ancient street artifacts called payphones. They got some change together and they made a call to the Rebbe's office to ask the secretary to pass on to the Rebbe that they are stuck in Chicago. Can't get out. Ask a blessing for the Rebbe. Something will happen, Listen, the Rebbe wants the roads can be cleared in no time. So the secretary said, please hold on. I think it was Rabbi Klein. Rabbi Klein goes into the Rebbe. He comes back a couple of moments later and he said, the Rebbe wants to know, what does it mean you're stuck? It's a fairly simple word. The Rebbe wants to know, what do you mean by stuck? A Jew is never stuck somewhere. If you are somewhere, it's because God wants you to be there. You're not stuck. You're meant to be there. God put you there, not by mistake. You're not there just because it's snowing. You're there because you need to be there. And they never instructed them to go to whichever places they can go to, in universities, malls, and so on, which is what they did. They spent the next day, I'm not sure if it was a day or two, till they were able to fly back to New York. They had stands, giving out Shabbos candles, sharing all kinds of things with other people. There are people to this day who are affected by them being stuck in Chicago. We have a moment that we meet someone, we have an obligation to share with them whatever we can, which we think will be accepted. I'm going to leave you with one more story. Like Rabbi Smith said, yes, I like telling stories. Because I find there's one thing that is universal. It's the same with kids and adults. We all like a good story. And we take our best lessons from stories. After all, if it's dressed up, so to speak, by daily life, it's easy to get it, and it's very easy to remember it. I'm taking you to the third story by Rabbi Jacobson. He said he was once brought out to speak in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And they had arranged a ride for him to take him back to where he was staying in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. So after the talk was over, it was very late at night already, the person that was supposed to give him a ride didn't show up. Okay, he's got to get back to Yerushalayim, so they hired a taxi, a sherut, as they call him in Israel. He gets into the taxi, tells him where he's got to go, and he's a little apprehensive. Rabbi Jacobson, he looks at the driver, not wearing a kippah. Okay, listen, a lot of Israelis don't wear kippahs. He's got a very dark complexion, and he's wondering to himself, I hope he's not an Arab. This is 3 a.m. No one's on the streets. Oh, please. Oh, Mir. While he's having these thoughts, the driver says to him, would you mind if I put on some things I like to listen to? So I said, no, sure, go ahead. Now, Rabbi Jacobson is thinking to himself, I don't know, if I'm lucky enough, maybe it'll be one of my sermons, but I sure hope it's not like Arabic music, because this is really going to freak me out. Anyway, he puts on his recording, and Rabbi Jacobson actually can't believe his ears. It's someone basically reading Tehillim, reading Psalms. From chapter 1 through the entire book, he's just going chapter 1, chapter 2. It's a Yemenite person reading with a Yemenite sing-song tune and just going through Psalms. You know, after a couple of minutes, he says, excuse me, just ask you a question. Why do you listen to this? He said, I'll tell you the truth. I'm not religious. I don't get a chance to go into synagogue and so on. I spend so much time on the road, but I really want to be able to talk to God. I want to say words of Tehillim. So whenever I have a chance, I put on this recording. And it runs through the entire book of Tehillim, 150 chapters. Rabbi Jacobson says to him, it's incredible. He said, how many times do you go through Tehillim? He says, it depends on the day. 4 to 5 times a day. The entire book of Tehillim, 4 to 5 times. So Rabbi Jacobson says, I'm sitting in the backseat of this car, and I feel like a real fool. I'm taken aback. I got into the car thinking, who is this? What is this? Am I safe with this person? And this very same person that appears not necessarily Jewish, certainly doesn't appear to be devout in any way. He listens, maybe even says Tehillim throughout the entire day and night. It's incredible. He can listen to talk show hosts. He can listen to music. He can listen to the news. No, he decides to take his time and spend it with holiness. It's incredible where you find holiness. You never know. You never know you turn a corner and see something amazing like that. And sometimes we can be lucky enough to be the one to inspire someone to do things like that. But as the Rebbe said, we should not be discouraged if we think, or for that matter, even if we're certain in our mind that someone will do the mitzvah and only do it one time. I remember years ago, I was once walking down the street in Coral Springs. It was Sukkot morning. I was walking with my daughter. Then there was my daughter, who's Rabbi Smith's sister-in-law now, and she's a little one sitting in the carriage, and from afar I see the UPS truck. I was walking down a business strip on the way to shul. Excuse me. The UPS truck was driven by a guy who I knew. He was the guy delivered to shul always, and his name was Yossel. But unfortunately, Yossel had a necklace that he wore, which did not make you think he was Jewish, let's just say. He was married to a Christian woman and the whole story. He's a nice guy per se, but he refused to do any mitzvahs. Putting on 12 minutes is out of the question. Not happening. So I walked down the street and I thought to myself, got to get it to do a mitzvah. I had my lulav and esrog, so I stopped. I was like halfway down the block still. I unrolled my lulav from its the wet rag that it was on and so on, so to keep it moist. And I had it at the ready. And I see him walk into a store. Now I'm next to the store. And I stop. And I'm holding lulav and esrog in my hand. And he comes down and says, do me a favor, hold this a second. I got to get something from the carriage. So he takes the lulav and esrog from me. He's nice. He's a nice person, so he takes it from me. So he did the mitzvah of shaking the lulav and esrog because he held them together. Do I think he's ever going to do it again? I certainly didn't think so. And I don't know. I don't know him anymore. I haven't lost contact with him. That mitzvah on its own right stands on its own 2 feet, so to speak. If it's just for that mitzvah alone, it was worth all the efforts. It never says so much clearly in words. Oftentimes we feel discouraged. He's going to do it once. He's not going to care. He doesn't even want to do it. That's not our business. Of course, it would be nice if we want to. If we can get the person to want to do it, they'll encourage him to do it many more times. Of course. But that doesn't mean doing it whichever way it may be won't have a certain desired effect. Like we said before, when we use anything in our world for a divine purpose, to fulfill God's commandments, it always, always leaves its mark. God brought the heavens down on Mount Sinai and enabled us to do the same again and again. So I hope that I hope the class wasn't that much worse than Rabbi Smith's class. It's always good to have a change of face, Rabbi Smith, right? It's already a plus.
Great. Thank you so much, Rabbi Engel. This is amazing. Great. They love everyone. I see everyone's loving it. Big Yasha Kayach. If anyone wants to ask any last questions, we have a minute here. Yes, Bernie.
Yes. Thank you, Rabbi, for the inspiring words. I may well be the oldest person on here, so I just want to share something with you from my experience, that you can change someone's life with what you could consider a throwaway phrase. It's happened to me so many times. My kids would come back, your father, and I didn't even remember what I said. I think it's an important message.
Thank you. No, share with us one of the stories that had happened with us. I can repeat it.
Well,
later.
I had one of my friend's son who was worried about school and all that, and he came to see me, and I said, young people are worried. They don't know what's going to happen in their life. I told him at that point, I'm 60 years old. I still don't know. There's only the rare person whose Zeta was a doctor, the father was. I said, don't let that bother you. That's all I said. He came back years later, gay vase.
Yeah. I don't know if I have competition for you or not, but I give a class here in Tamarac in the Kings Point senior community. And I have a student who's turning 102. So I'm not sure if he's competing with you. You should both live to 120 and more. Gesundheit.
Baruch Hashem, yom yom.
Yes.
Coming from Montreal just to be here in the sunshine, it's keeping me alive.
Yeah.
My wife reminded me, Rabbi Engel, that you were a teacher of one of my sons, Menachem.
I was going to say Menachem. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I was